G'day guys, Rukshan and Avi here from the Opposition podcast. We're doing a emergency broadcast again just to react to some of the proposed changes in Victoria by the Premier Jacinta Allen to increase laws around protests by giving police more powers and some other laws that they want to introduce. They want to legislate against certain types of protest activity to deal with some of the what they deem as issues around social cohesion that we've seen in the state of Victoria especially. And some of the points that she made today was also around addressing the rise of anti-Semitism and stamping out some issues related to that as well. So we're going to watch the video from the Premier Jacinta Allen, as she talks about these proposed changes, and we'll react to some of the things that she's talking about. But Avi, have you had a look into some of what's been proposed so far? What do you think about what's being said here?
Listen, I was just calmly trying to have a workout at the gym when you called me with the breaking news, and I've been watching it since then. I was tuned into ABC. I got to say, to begin with, I have a problem when the government wants to introduce new legislation under the guise of protecting whatever, because I know all too well that often the laws that are the reasons they give us for implementing laws are not the real reasons behind them. And when you have current legislation that has not been used the entire, what are we talking about, 14 months now, that hasn't been used, we don't actually need new legislation if you just use what the current existing laws. And then I found further problems with it, which I think we'll unpack as we
that was quite interesting, that clip you found from we'll get to that later. And I just want to say the same points. I am so opposed to the encroachment by the government and the police state that we've seen here in Victoria, increasing their powers over us, because we have seen them use those kind of powers for intents that abuse it for things that we would never have imagined against its own citizenry, just to protect the government. Like, we see that all the time. So I'm opposed to it on that fact.
To be completely clear, I, more than most people, know that there is a major problem in our city, especially when it comes to the rise of Jew hatred, anti-Semitism, whatever you want to call it, by the far left, by Islamists and many in the Islamic community, unfortunately, and on the fringes of the right as well. There is that they've all united in the last 14 months, and they feel like they have this free pass to do and say whatever they want, and make literally one of the smallest minority communities feel unsafe. And it's not unfounded that the reason why they're feeling unsafe. It has turned violent. It has you have had people marching the streets in support of terrorism, actual jihadi terrorism. So there's a real reason behind it, and most of the Jewish community is feeling it, and they're probably even feeling some sort of gratefulness that Jacinta Allen is now proposing something to do something about it. She should have done something about it 14 months ago, but this is not it. That's all I'm saying. This is not it, because really they could have done a lot from day one without imposing
these things. Well, Avi, I just want to, just before we get to watching Jacinta Allen, people are just requesting that you put your sound up. For some, I'm perfect apparently. My audio.
Well, you have to. You have.
No, it's 100% up for the interview guest.
I don't know. I don't know what to do, mate. I don't know.
You just got to speak a bit louder, maybe.
I've got to talk louder. Is that the problem? Okay.
Yeah, talk a bit louder, or speak. Don't face towards your mic. Don't look at your phone, and we'll go from there. So let's pull up this video from Jacinta Allen. I'll just turn that on. Let's have a look. It goes for a little bit. I might stop it here and there, but this kind of goes to the crux of what is being proposed in our state. So this is a stream that happened on the ABC Live. I just clipped it to go over. So let's have a listen in.
Victorian Premier Jacinta Allen is speaking.
And also I listened very carefully. What's clear is Jews increasingly feel that simple promise of a modern multicultural Victoria is being denied them. How else do you describe a real and demonstrated increase in reports of anti-Semitic incidents? How else do you describe a tendency for extreme, dangerous and radical protest that is allowing anti-Semitism and hate to thrive within it? How else to describe the protests that have targeted, of all things, a faith's place of worship? How else to describe those two despicable words that were greeted school kids at Mount Scopus? How else to describe the small but menacing acts of intimidation at a local level, which makes communities feel powerless to quickly escalate and respond to? And also too, how else to describe a synagogue going up in flames in the middle of the night in an act of terror while people were inside quietly studying, quietly praying. This is simply unacceptable in our modern multicultural state. It's unacceptable in our modern multicultural Victoria. And today, the Government of Victoria renews its promise to Jews and to everyone of every background. Whoever you are, whoever you pray to, you deserve to be safe and welcome here in this state. And today too, we support that promise with strong action to fight hate and help Victorians heal. Action that I will now outline. We will be setting a standard that we do not tolerate anti-Semitism. We do not tolerate anti-Semitism. Just as we do not tolerate any form of hate, racism or discrimination against a Jew, a Muslim, a Sikh, a Hindu, a Chinese Victorian, or against a woman, against a gay, lesbian or trans person. It's all despicable. All racism is wrong. All racism is evil. It's hateful. It's corrosive. And anti-Semitism is racism. And there are too many. There are too many who want to qualify anti-Semitism or make excuses for it. And I want to make it absolutely clear that I never will. We've also had enough of the protests that have caused.
So that's her general statement around, I guess, why a lot of this is happening. And she specifically said to the Jews of Victoria specifically, do you think this kind of targeted response that she's making and singling out the community, of course, she's addressing the issues that we're seeing, but do you think, I'm seeing a lot of the commentary online and people are saying, well, this is just to appease the issues faced by one population. Do you think this is just, what do you make of that?
I think it's an attempt to look like she's doing something about an issue she's been highly criticised for doing nothing about. But it's funny to me because I don't know if my mic is still silent. Is my mic still all right now? Or
I don't know. Some people say you're fine, so it's interesting. Maybe some people just joking with us in the comments.
No, I'm getting messages. Those of you messaging me, you can let me know if my mic's still quiet. I don't know. It looks like it looks right here when I'm looking at the levels. But yeah, this is just an attempt to look like she's doing something. It's like a virtue signaling on this issue. But it's funny that she, even at the end of her statement, makes it about all hate and it's like when they talk about anti-Semitism in the last 14 months, they couldn't not bring in Islamophobia when so often. And I made that point to the Prime Minister when I tried to question him, is like, well done. Yesterday was the first time you didn't conflate anti-Semitism and Islamophobia, because which was kind of offensive, often offensive within the Jewish community, because the exact people spewing the hate happen to be from the Islamic community for whatever reason. Obviously, they've been a big part of the push of these protests, these anti-Israel protests in the last 14 months. It was the Islamic community or a part, an element of the Islamic community on October 9, before Israel even fought back, that were rallying and calling either to gas the Jews or where's the Jews, whatever, in outside the Sydney Opera House. But it's
like they've all of a sudden had this epiphany where it's like, okay, like this stuff is not acceptable, but it's been acceptable, like you said, for a long time now in our state. And there's been all sorts of stuff that have happened. And it does feel like it is kind of this band-aid type thing where it's like, okay, cool, how can we address this? Let's just crush down on these, what some people would say are civil liberties and, freedom of speech and the right to protest, all these things. Let's just crush all that. It's an easy way out for us. Let's just say everyone's banned from stuff because of the behavior of a certain group of people that they could have tackled. We're just going to blanket ban everything and we're going to put it on this particular issue. And this is the reason. That's why I was saying it's like people are saying, oh, it's because of the Jews, like they're appeasing the Jewish community. And that's why they're doing this. I think it's just the government, like you said, being completely lazy after for a year, not saying anything about the crap that was happening on the street. Like these people who are causing a lot of the damage on the streets of Melbourne, especially this kind of domestic economic terrorism that they've been doing as well by blocking ports and vandalizing trucks and stuff. It's these like far left wing, Antifa style people. Yes, they're in the face mask, and they've been doing it for so long, and they hardly tackle them for so long now. So and then now they're saying, oh well, because of these people, we're going to do all this stuff. So let's get to now what the proposed proposals are for the police
Let me do a
powers.
quick test.
Bit of time.
Tell me, is the mic better coming across?
Nah, it's soft.
No,
It's worse. That was worse before. That was worse.
That's worse now or worse?
That's
before?
okay for me.
Is it?
For me, it's fine. You sound great, but I think maybe my sound is too high. Maybe I
don't know.
There you go.
I
that's
think
good.
I think it sends me back feedback. All right. Anyways, I don't know. The other point I want to quickly make before we watch this new video is, the idea. So like, it's a double. The government gets two things out of this. One, she gets to pretend like they're actually doing something after 14 months, when, like I said, they could have and should have done something 14 months ago, without necessarily introducing any new laws or legislation. To look like they're doing something now, and two, they get to, it's a power grab. It's like what we saw in COVID, using a crisis to essentially give themselves or give the state more power. I don't accept that. I think that the government and the police, they send most of it, they have enough power. There's one point in this that I've seen which would be good in theory, but the video we're about to watch proves that it's not about helping or protecting the Jewish community from those that are protesting on the street. Play the video.
Well, I want to just play the police, what the proposed changes are first, and then we'll play that video just to give people some context.
Yep.
Disruption in our streets. Now, peaceful protests can and must be protected in this state. Protests that harm others cannot. Victorians have witnessed extreme, dangerous and radical conduct in numerous public demonstrations over the past year. And it would be wrong for me to say that everyone who's attending these protests is anti-Semitic. There's no one saying that. But we know some are, and we know some are showing that. We also know that hate and anti-Semitism are thriving in these environments. That's why we're going to give police the powers to weed out and stamp out the influence of extreme and radical participation in public protests. Firstly, we will ban the flags and symbols of listed terrorist organisations in public. That includes Hamas, Hezbollah and several other groups, including white national extremists and radical racist violent extremist right-wing groups. We will also ban the use. We'll ban the use of.
I just want to go through each point as she says it, because firstly, terrorist organizations, by definition, which are outlawed,
yes,
they could already do something. They could have done something 14 months ago. You don't need new legislation to ban their flag. And throwing in right-wing extremists is just like, it just proves what the motivation is. It is nonsense. In the last year, okay, where have we seen these right-wing neo-Nazis rallying to? It hasn't been there. They are scum. Yes, we agree, but most people laugh at them.
Yeah.
Most of the Jewish community is not scared of neo-Nazis marching in the street in the last year. That has not been the issue. The issue has been far left-wing extremists, has been Islamists, jihadis, even those that consider themselves moderate within the Islamic community. The Islamic Council of Victoria, for goodness sake, was one of the groups that were inciting the rallies in Caulfield outside the synagogue a year ago. So
you're right, yeah.
Trying to tie in this right-wing extremists and then banning the Nazis, it is nonsense. It is absolute nonsense. Anyways, go on.
No, that's what I was going to say. They're putting all this on the feet of the Jewish community in Victoria, but like you said, they've always had these laws to stop people from carrying terrorist, symbols and all this kind of stuff. And yes, those Nazis are pesky; they're annoying, the neo-Nazis, whatever. But they've been quite quiet recently, and they've from harassing women and stuff on the steps of Parliament. I mean, as in gate crashing that particular protest. So,
but if you're making it about protecting the Jews, they have not been the ones really targeting the Jews. They have not been. You have not seen the neo-Nazis marching in Caulfield. You have seen far left-wing extremists and Islamo-fascists. That's what you've seen.
Yeah, let's keep going.
balaclavas at protests. We know they are being used to conceal identities, shield agitators from crowd control measures like capsicum spray. Well, face masks aren't a free pass to break the law, and there should be no place to hide in this state if you're a racist.
I just got to pause it there. And of course, when we hear about face masks and wearing at protests, there was a time where you were forced to wear face masks if you were outside to protest.
I reckon for a second, because it's on this issue, and
Yep.
I think we need to answer what she's saying, because the ABC give context, and this is what's so dangerous about this, and this is what proves it has nothing to do with protecting the Jewish community. I think just quickly flip to that other video.
I'll load up the other video. Give me a second, because you're right. Because when I watched that, when you sent me that from the ABC, everything that this illusion of what they're proposing seems to not really address the issues that we're facing. And it goes back to actually giving the government a way out when it comes to certain particular groups or issues that they can then control around. So let's just play the clip.
More power.
Yes.
Giving the government more power, and they're giving themselves the way out to actually not impose it on the exact people.
Yes.
That they are claiming to be targeting and to protect the people they claim to be protecting.
So
play that video.
Let's have a listen to the ABC and how they interpret all of this. Just pull it down a little bit.
Melbourne. Hi there, Leanne. So tell us about the bans that have been announced.
Well, the Victorian government today announced a raft of measures looking at combating what they say is a rise of anti-Semitic incidents in Australia, as well as in the wake of that firebombing of the Adass Israel synagogue. And amongst those measures, a lot of them focus on giving police the powers to stamp out what the Premier Jacinta Allen described as extreme, dangerous and radical public protests. So some of those bans include banning the use of flags and symbols of listed terrorist organisations in public. That includes organisations like Hamas, Hezbollah, as well as some right-wing organisations. The government also said it's looking at banning the use of face masks and balaclavas at protests. The government says that they know that they're being used to conceal identities. We have seen some particularly right-wing organisations wear balaclavas during public protests. The government says that exemptions, though, would apply for legitimate health, religious or cultural reasons when wearing a mask. They've also announced banning the use of...
Pause.
I'll stop that there.
That was the point. Your reaction.
I mean, that we heard it there, because if you just look at it on the face value of the way the news is being reported, it would appear like all masks and these kind of things are being banned at protests. But you heard it there; they have put in an exemption there for religious, for health-related issues, and so on. So there are these caveats that they've put in there that address some of the things that we were talking about, and it seems to go to, when you look at the issue around the current state of protests we've had in the state. Well, a lot of the people are covering their faces with the keffiyeh. So that's the masks that they're using. And of course, we've seen the, I would say, cultural appropriation by the far left, who love to don this. Whenever I walk in Melbourne, I see them walking around wearing that particular type of attire. So they would then just use that as a mask, and the police can't do anything about it. So really, this doesn't really do anything. Is that your interpretation?
Yeah, so with what she said, there's two things. Firstly, the idea that we've seen, that the ABC is framing it, that the problem we've seen with masks is coming from right-wing groups. So they're clearly pointing to that, like 13 or 15 neo-Nazis that every once in a while pop up in a random place wearing their little black shorts and their black clothes, and some of them are wearing, or most of them are wearing balaclavas. That's what they're saying that the government is targeting when they're targeting the masks. So it has nothing to do with countering the pro-Palestine, but more the anti-Israel, the pro-Hamas, the pro-Hezbollah groups, because it's not them that are wearing your balaclavas. They're not. They're wearing keffiyehs. They're wearing the things, like you said, the things that are protected by this are religious, cultural clothing. So that means keffiyehs. That means a woman that comes in the full burqa, she's protected. There's no way that the police are going to. So the groups that are coming every single week to rally and calling for genocide in Melbourne, the ones that the Jews are actually scared of, are protected. And what's the third group? What's the third piece of uniform the left wear to rally against Jews? What is it? it's the COVID mask. They're all wearing either a keffiyeh, or they're wearing Islamic like full face covering, or they're wearing the COVID mask. And those three items are all protected. So they are non-face covering at rallies is not being outlawed. It's literally only the neo-Nazis that are getting targeted, but they are not posing the real threat at the moment to the Jewish community. Sorry. So thanks, but no thanks. Do your job properly. If you're saying no, and I agree, no face masks at rally. I actually think they were talking about that years ago. You should implement that, because we need to hold those people accountable that are calling for genocide. And at all protests, also the far left-wing protests about climate change and all this, don't let them get away with it. When they turn violent, when they block the streets, when they do things to disrupt the every average Aussie or scare them from our city, we need to be able to hold them accountable. We need to see who's there and who's doing it. So yeah, pull their face mask off. But all you've done now is given them a way out, because your intention is not really to protect the Jewish community from these far left-wing extremists and the Islamo-fascists. It's just not going to happen. So anyone in the Jewish community that thinks this is a good idea, sorry, you are gravely mistaken, and you can come back in a few weeks or a few months when nothing has happened to any of the guys that are threatening our community, and you can say, sorry, Avi, I was wrong. You, as usual, were right.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. Like when I hear that the face mask exemption for health reasons and religious reasons as well for face coverings.
What health reasons in 2024, 2025 do we have?
Well, I mean, maybe the far left terrified of COVID still. They're still protecting themselves. They're terrified. Perhaps it's legitimate. I'm just saying as a joke. Perhaps it's legitimate. Their fear.
You literally see where we were at the protest a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
They rock up to the protest and they put on their COVID mask.
Bro,
so they're not scared about COVID until they arrive at the mass gathering.
And the other problem, I understand perhaps, there's certain types of, I see people protesting in countries like Iran, for instance, right? These brave people protesting against their government, no face mask. They're showing their face. They believe in what they are protesting for and what they stand for. They believe in these things. But what we're seeing, these people who are wearing face masks, really, and they're saying they're protesting for a very just cause. What are they so afraid of? Like when people were protesting for COVID, people were not wearing against COVID. People were not wearing face masks. They were not worried about being identified by the government because they truly believed in their message, and they were going there directly to address the issues put to them, the misery created by the government in their lives, and they were not hiding themselves. But what we see,
the vast majority that are going now to protest with face coverings, whether it's the keffiyeh that they're culturally appropriating, whether it's a keffiyeh because it is their culture, whether and remember the wrapped keffiyeh face is also a symbol of the terrorists. That's what they literally wear in all their videos, in all their propaganda, in their terrorist acts. They wrap their face in the keffiyeh, but it is a cultural thing of the Arab.
Yes.
In that area. The COVID mask, like no one is rocking up to these protests and covering their faces for any good reason.
Exactly.
There is no good reason.
Exactly.
You're in Australia in 2024, 2025. You are safe. You have a right to protest. The only thing making you cover your face is the fact that you come there with the intent to break a law.
That's right.
To call for genocide, to intimidate other Victorians. And and the government's just showing here exactly those two things that we said.
Well, I mean, someone said masks should be okay. Just wait until the government start using tear gas on us. Look, I mean, I understand people bring eye coverings and stuff because the government might pepper spray them and so on, but that rarely happens. And if you're saying that you come into a peaceful protest where it's being allowed by the government and it's been facilitated, that's very different to the types of protests we had during COVID, for instance, where protesting itself was outlawed. So the mere act of turning up at a protest meant the government might come and, with the police, beat you up, spray you, and do all sorts of stuff to you. So yes, there's a case there for protecting yourself with, a mask or eye coverings and things like this. But just turning up to a peaceful rally every Sunday to so-called protest against what they're claiming is human rights abuses and all these kind of things, which is being protected by the police now for a year. That is not a protest where you're going to get beaten up by the police, unless, of course, you are going there to commit acts of violence and, like you said, break the law. And more often than not, these far left-wing activists, the moment that they get a chance, they will smash something they will throw something. And I've seen it time and time again. Luckily, not as much in Australia, but they do it. And it's becoming increasingly like that. I've seen in Canada, it's gotten worse. And I think here it's going to get worse as well. So this clampdown kind of makes sense. But again, there's ways out for them. And it's all in the law and doesn't really help in this instance.
I think you made a super important point there. The major difference between these protests and something like the anti-lockdown COVID protests. The funny thing is you saw a very small minority of people even then rocking up and covering their face, because most people who went to those protests were proud to say that they were at the protest, even though it in itself was deemed illegal by the government, by the state, by the police, who came in heavy-handed. But right now, so there I could actually understand if you were scared to be seen because you didn't want cops kicking in your door, and you were scared because they were immediately firing pepper spray and rubber bullets and all that. That is not happening now. For 14 months, the police have protected these protests. And the only reason why people today are rocking up to protests with their face coverings, whether it's the pro-Palestinian or any other far left-wing protest with a climate change one, is because they plan to break the law. And I think Victorians have had more than enough. And people are sick of it. And it's time to hold these people accountable. But these new announcements are not going to hold anyone accountable, because it has given them all a way out. All you've got to do is continue doing what you've been doing for 14 months. Wrap yourself up in that keffiyeh, put on a burqa, whatever you want, put on a COVID mask, and the government, the police will not make you take off your mask, and they will not implement these new measures that they said are there to protect the Jewish community.
I think that question around the keffiyeh in particular needs to be put directly to the Premier. I don't know if it was in this press conference, but I think some clarification around that will really show the scope of these changes.
Well, basically,
that
they're
making.
saying any cultural thing. So I think you can, I can confidently sit here and tell you that they are not going to target anyone. But yeah, good question. But you know, as questions get hard for the Premier, we know what she does. I witnessed that firsthand only a week and a half ago outside the synagogue. Ruxana, I've actually got to run.
You've got to run. I think we'll wrap it up there, guys. But you can jump on X and find some clips.
Let us know your thoughts, guys. I know I talked over Ruxana a bit this one because we had to rush this one out, and I think.
Well, I'll be back on later tonight, just before your show, Avi. I might do a show between 6 p.m. and 7 p.m. leading into the Avi Yemeni report at 7 p.m. Are you doing that tonight?
Are you going to call into the Yemeni
No,
report?
I'm not calling in tonight, but I'll be doing my show leading into yours. So, but I probably won't touch on this topic too much, but perhaps you might be talking about this. So you can tell people about your show. What time is it happening?
Yep, 7 o'clock as usual, Tuesday night. I might touch on this a bit. I think we covered it. Like, there was nothing here that we missed. There was no. Those were the important points.
Yeah. Last point probably is that they're also going to introduce. Well, she wants to put in powers around stopping protests at religious places of worship. Again, I think that goes really down to the fact that we have issues around multiculturalism in Australia, where people don't understand the sensitivities of perhaps what free speech entails. And then, using grievances overseas to protest at religious institutions in a manner which perhaps is not, safe for social cohesion itself. So I think the government's hand is kind of being forced on this issue, because we were seeing an increase of protests at synagogues, like it was happening all of a sudden. Every single week, there were people in front of synagogues protesting. It was just getting out of hand.
In theory, I'm not against that idea. I want to see what the actual proposed legislation is, because I don't, and that wasn't part of the measures announced. That was like, I think, vague commentary around general measures. I would want to see what that says. I think stopping protests from going into residential neighborhoods and targeting Jewish neighborhoods is important in itself. Like the idea that they've come down to Caulfield, so far left-wing extremists from the northern suburbs, or also from neighboring suburbs, the Islamo-fascists that were traveling into Caulfield to target Jews. I think, yeah, there should be something in place. The police should have some sort of power. But again, I would be very careful. I would want to read it. I would want to see how it is proposed, and the wording of any proposed legislation, because I just don't trust this government. Sorry, I don't. And they don't have They do not have the Jewish community's interests at heart. They have their own political survival that they're trying to work with. They are virtue signaling. They want people to think they're doing something when it is clear by the ones that they've already announced. It is clear that it has less to do with actually protecting the Jewish community from the real threat, rather than looking like they are doing something about this clear problem that we're seeing in 2024 going into 2025. But again, a year ago, 2023 going into 2024, we saw the same problems.
Yeah, well, on that note, guys, we will end this stream. Thanks for joining into another emergency broadcast. We've got to keep calling it the emergency broadcast, even though some people are saying, what is the emergency? It's just
It's an emergency. It is an emergency.
It's an emergency. You know, we're
broadcast.
discussing changes, vital changes
Guys,
to the laws.
and remember, this is all part of our opposition show. This is both our most successful show. Like, I know we try to cut off and do our own thing on the side, but the opposition show, you can catch up on all of them and become members. That way you can actually join in on our actual show Thursday nights. This week, Thursday night, 7 p.m. is our scheduled show. We're going to do a lot of emergency live streams as it happens between things. Like, I'm literally between meetings. That's why I look like I'm ADHD at the moment. I came from the gym. I had to run, do this, and then we're going to, but I like the idea of just jumping in and talking about the issues, but we're going to have to get on top of this mic problem if it really is a problem.
Yeah.
And